number of these Russian godfathers had clear, substantiated connections with key players, really, really big star players. And one of those guys we interviewed in his offices just near the Kremlin in Moscow, and then he took us for dinner in a Georgian restaurant. Well, he didn't take us; he invited us. A number of the crew didn't want to go. My mentor, who's a brilliant journalist, said, "Look, when the head of the Russian mafia, the man U.S. Congress, says this guy runs organized crime in Moscow, Russia, you got to go." So he and I went. And during that conversation, it was quite an intense one, and I write about it in my first book, The Fix, Organized Crime in Soccer. But in the midst of that conversation, I said, "Well, why do you like ice hockey so much?" And he said, "Well, I like this particular player, but the guy that the sport I really love is football. In fact, I was at the 1994 World Cup final in the president's box, the VVIP section. And there was about 300 people. I think Al Gore, the vice president, was there, maybe Hillary Clinton, Pele. But he was in front of them. He was in the front. Yao Havelange, who was the then president of FIFA. Next to him was Sepp Blatter, the man who would become president of FIFA. Next to him was the president of the Russian Football Federation. And next to him was the guy that U.S. Congress would go on to say, this guy's the head of the mafia. And so I'm having dinner, it's late night in Moscow, and I'm sitting across from this guy, and I have two thoughts in my mind. First one is, I really hope I get out of this place alive. And two, if I do, I want to know what this man is doing at the very epicenter of world sport. Because as you know, and many of your listeners know, symbolically, you can't get much higher than the box at the World Cup final. The players will be walking past you. The cup is right there. This is, for our Catholic listeners, that's like being with the Pope on Easter Sunday in the Vatican as he's blessing people. I mean, this is a really powerful, powerful position. So that was the beginning of my look into organized crime in sport. I was very, very fortunate. I was working as a journalist in Iraq during the Iraq War of 2003, and I got news that I had got a scholarship to do a PhD at the University of Oxford in the UK with an amazing unit there that studied organized crime. And so I did my PhD there, and as part of my PhD research, I went to Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and fell in with a gang who travels around the world fixing major football tournaments. So that's at least part of my journey.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, a very warm welcome to the VAR Show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to conduct interviews, and we have one of the most famous authors with regards to football and also an expert on match fixing in football, Mr. Declan Hill with us. So without wasting much time, I'd like to first thank Declan for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
First of all, namaskar to all my friends in Nepal. It's a great honor to be here. It's a great country. And I'm very happy to be speaking to you guys in Nepal, particularly at this difficult time for the whole world. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'll get straight to the topic of football books and your journey. And you started, I think, with more theater in India. And how did you get to football and writing books and match fixing and everything?
Well, I started as an actor, as you know. I worked for a little bit in Bollywood. But then I went back to university and started working as an investigative journalist. And I was doing a program with a documentary team from America and Canada. And we were looking at the connections between the Russian mafia, really senior Russian mafia godfathers, and key players in what's called the National Hockey League, which is more or less our surrogate religion here in Canada and America. Certainly in Canada it is. Anyway, number of these Russian godfathers had clear, substantiated connections with key players, really, really big star players. And one of those guys we interviewed in his offices just near the Kremlin in Moscow, and then he took us for dinner in a Georgian restaurant. Well, he didn't take us; he invited us. A number of the crew didn't want to go. My mentor, who's a brilliant journalist, said, "Look, when the head of the Russian mafia, the man U.S. Congress, says this guy runs organized crime in Moscow, Russia, you got to go." So he and I went. And during that conversation, it was quite an intense one, and I write about it in my first book, The Fix, Organized Crime in Soccer. But in the midst of that conversation, I said, "Well, why do you like ice hockey so much?" And he said, "Well, I like this particular player, but the guy that the sport I really love is football. In fact, I was at the 1994 World Cup final in the president's box, the VVIP section. And there was about 300 people. I think Al Gore, the vice president, was there, maybe Hillary Clinton, Pele. But he was in front of them. He was in the front. Yao Havelange, who was the then president of FIFA. Next to him was Sepp Blatter, the man who would become president of FIFA. Next to him was the president of the Russian Football Federation. And next to him was the guy that U.S. Congress would go on to say, this guy's the head of the mafia. And so I'm having dinner. It's late night in Moscow, and I'm sitting across from this guy, and I have two thoughts in my mind. First one is, I really hope I get out of this place alive. And two, if I do, I want to know what this man is doing at the very epicenter of world sport. Because as you know, and many of your listeners know, symbolically, you can't get much higher than the box at the World Cup final. The players will be walking past you. The cup is right there. This is, for our Catholic listeners, that's like being with the Pope on Easter Sunday in the Vatican as he's blessing people. I mean, this is a really powerful, powerful position. So that was the beginning of my look into organized crime in sport. I was very, very fortunate. I was working as a journalist in Iraq during the Iraq War of 2003, and I got news that I had got a scholarship to do a PhD at the University of Oxford in the UK with an amazing unit there that studied organized crime. And so I did my PhD there, and as part of my PhD research, I went to Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and fell in with a gang who travels around the world fixing major football tournaments. So that's at least part of my journey.
And is The Fix, the book that you wrote, is it entirely or inspired by the person you met?
Well, that was the start of it. But remember, when I was writing in 2007, 2008, no one believed there was fixing in football. We knew there was fixing in cricket. There would have been a number of prominent scandals like the Hansi Cronje in South Africa, but really most people refused to believe it. I remember arguments at the University of Oxford. People would just say, it doesn't happen. You just you're making this up. And so what I had to do for a lot of the book was explain that fixing in football has gone on for a long time. It was on the Manchester United team of Bobby Charlton, for example, something that shocked me, this great iconic team that had survived the Munich air crash. It was on many, many leagues. So I broke it down and explained how and why it happened. And then I said, and this is really the message of our generation in sport, is that the sports gambling market has globalized. It's just gone nuts. It's now a $1.7 trillion market. And that money is flowing around the world. And so it's ending up in places like Nepal. And the gangs, as you know better than I do, have been working with players, working with teams in Nepal to fix games. And for our listeners, that's like, what? Like, why would some international guy care about Nepal football? I mean, we love it, but why would some big guy? But again and again and again, as I'm doing these interviews around the world, it's the same question. And it's because of this globalized sports gambling market.
But don't you think again, for layman, you have match fixing where there is a financial crunch, and you spoke about United. Maybe back then it was football was not financially so sound as what it is now. So do you think like finance for a footballer is the primary goal, or is it even like threats to them? Because you say like how mafias are involved in everything.
Look, there's two types of fixing going on. One is something that is so common, the Italians call it il sistema. It's this gray market and exists in Spain, Portugal, Greece, Turkey, many of the former Soviet countries. It's a system where about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the season, the teams that really need the points, they either want to win the championship or they want to avoid relegation, start trying to buy points from the teams that are in the middle. And much of the last quarter of a season in Italy is just theater, and everyone kind of knows it among the cognoscenti, among the senior people in Italian football. They kind of know it, and if they don't know it, then they got to be stupid. That has been around for 100 years. But what we're seeing now is the globalization of sports gambling. And so it's gone right around the world into almost every single league. In fact, every single league. Maybe there was a league like in the Faroe Islands, but I can't think of one at the moment. Maybe the Faroe Islands that has got this kind of gambling fixing going on.
And I wanted to ask you, like most of these are, like have roots in maybe betting that goes on in countries where betting is legal, and maybe where the odds are very in huge amount in favor of a team. So that's where, like match fixing is very helpful, I think, other than maybe a country where there is no betting, because then the amount of finances involved is huge. Do you think it's something where like betting is also playing a part in match fixing?
Look, betting, legal or illegal, doesn't really matter. The betting market is massive. As you know, the Indian cricket match fixing is a byword. It's a joke. I don't understand why anyone takes Indian or Pakistani cricket seriously. It's so corrupt. And those markets are huge, and they're mostly illegal. They're massively illegal. So I don't think whether the betting is legal or illegal makes a difference. What matters is how the sport is governed and whether the players are being paid properly. And often in Pakistan particularly, but India as well, the players are their money is stolen. They're ripped off. I saw the same thing happening in a World Cup team. The Ghana team, they were stealing the money from the players. So some of the players, not all of them, but some of the players were taking money from the fixers to throw a game in the World Cup. That is the essential problem. If you're not going to pay your players, they're going to go looking for alternative money.
So like, how do you stop this? No one can stop. Can anyone stop this?
Oh gosh, no, I think it's very easy to stop it. Let's start with the World Cup final. I went, and again, I want to tell our listeners, because this is going to sound unbelievable to them, that I was skeptical as well. And again, in this first book, I talk about these very high level meetings that I had with the various Asian match fixers. And then they were fixing matches in front of me. And I was like, wow, like, what's the biggest match you ever fixed? And one of the guys goes, I don't know, the Olympics or the World Cup, which is bigger? And so I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know that you can fix all these Asian matches. I complete respect. I just don't think you can fix a game in the World Cup. So the guy looks at me with stone cold eyes and said, okay, watch me. So for the next 9 months, 10 months, I was, associated in and around the gang, watching them as they were fixing games at the World Cup. And the thing that makes it easy to understand is that of those 32 teams that play at the World Cup final, maybe 5 or 6 of them don't pay their players. Now, FIFA gives every national association, be it Italy, Argentina, Germany, whatever, $9 million to pay their players, get their hotels working, bring everybody around. But many of the African countries take that $9 million and they put it in the pocket of their officials, and they don't pay the players. Please excuse me. And you can see there have been player strikes. The Togo team in 2006 went on strike. Ghana has gone on strike many times. Cameroon has gone on strike. What happened to Nigeria in 2010 was they showed up in South Africa And normally with a proper professional team like Argentina or Italy, you maybe have 20 coaches, physiotherapists, cooks, the manager, psychotherapists, people like that come, and the team of 21 players come. It's quite a small, tight unit. The Nigerian Football Association brought 155 people, many of them wives, mistresses, or girlfriends. In fact, they had so many people at this hotel that they threw out the players. They made the players stay in this cheap little hotel down the road while the Nigerian associates had a great time at the 5-star hotel. And you watch the Nigerian football team in 2010, and I'm not suggesting that they fixed those games, but they weren't very good because they were sleeping in terrible conditions. They were, right beside a highway. They didn't have the thing. And they were playing Germany. They were playing these really strong teams that showed up ready to play, showed up ready to win. So this is a problem in the World Cup. And so fixing at the World Cup would be very, very easy, really easy. Just make sure the players get paid directly. Bingo, no problem. But at the moment, the football authorities around the world are so lazy. They're so endemically stupid. And they have really created a system that tolerates corruption. So if we could remove that problems, match fixing, we could deal with match fixing very easily.
Like you said, like it's probably very easy for FIFA or the governing body to eradicate match fixing at such a high level. Maybe the World Cup, Olympics, or maybe even the African Cup of Nations or the continental competitions. But do you think they don't do so because they themselves are involved in many other bigger projects and would therefore require the support down from these organizations?
Look, I think it's very difficult even now in 2020 to overstate how endemically corrupt FIFA and international football is. I advise any of our listeners that care about football to get the Department of Justice's indictments of the FIFA people they arrested in 2015. And you see that they were corrupting the TV rights, the stadium rights, the marketing rights, the merchandising rights. I mean, crikey, there might be an aspect of football that they didn't corrupt, but it was pretty difficult to see what it wasn't. And the whole system of governance in football is based on the guys who run the National Football Association voting for the president of FIFA. So if you anger those people too much, they won't vote for you. If you try to clean up the corruption, it won't give you their votes. So that is the real problem. That's the essence of the problem, is those National Football Association guys in some countries are so corrupt, it would shock people, absolutely shock. Even Nepalese or Canadians, we've got lots of corruption in Canada. I know in Nepal, you've got lots of corruption. But even by our standards, it's shocking, absolutely shocking.
No, I think I might be wrong, but I think someone from Nepal was allegedly involved in the vote scam.
There was one of the Mohammed bin Hammam proteges was a guy from Nepal, and Mohammed bin Hammam, to those guys who are new to this world, was the chief kind of go-to guy of Qatar football, and Qatar is just notorious. There was a German FIFA executive who was in charge of working with them for about 9, 10, 11 months. And after that time, he just resigned. And he said, I can't work with these guys. Everything they touch becomes corrupt. Now, immediately the Qatar people sued him and said, you can't say that. And immediately it went to a German court, and the German judge said, you know what? I'm not going to say whether he was right or wrong, but it's not an unreasonable thing to say. There's so much problems with Qatar. And Qatar Qatar's winning of the 2010 World Cup is notorious for the allegations and scandals around it. And then, as you know better than I do, the human trafficking. Many of the workers there are from your country, Nepal, and the way the Qatar people treat them is it's just grotesque. It's modern day slavery. Those aren't my words. Those are words of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and these major international agencies. It's just modern day slavery.
No, yeah, that the slavery part is absolutely true, because you see a lot of, it's very sad, if you see people going there probably who are misled and misdirected or mispromised by people from Nepal itself, probably who are getting the commission, and they come back in coffins. And there was a huge documentary which I had probably shared, I think 2-3 years back, and it was very sad to see. And FIFA is aware of all this, I think, but why do
Look,
they?
I think not only is FIFA aware of it, you asked me a question a few minutes ago, which was how do we stop match fixing? And surely it's impossible. And I said, no, it's actually quite easy. And one of the challenges that I have in my daily work is that much of the industry, much of the journalism, much of the academic work is still affected by the Qatar people. The Qatar people spend a lot of money to direct the attention away from the stories that are happening in Qatar. So if we could get the Qataris out of sports integrity, if we could just get them removed, if we get the Russians, who are one of these other agencies that things, we could clean up match fixing very, very quickly. I'm not saying we would remove it completely, but could cut it down by 90% very, very easily.
But do you think that's possible? Because they have huge hold of various aspects of football, maybe clubs, and maybe even like some TV companies who are huge players in the market right now. Do you think what you are saying, like cutting them off, is even possible? Even like Gazprom, which is one of the leading sponsors of many teams, has his roots there. So I don't think so it's possible to cut them out.
Look, I think they should go. I'm not sure about Gazprom. To me, they're an oil and gas company like any others, whatever. But look, we should just take the World Cup away from Qatar. Like people should not be coming back in coffins. One or two accidents, okay. I think, accidents happen. But the hundreds of Nepalis, the stadiums of blood, there's just no excuse for that. And FIFA is the world's biggest sporting organization. They don't need money. Why? We need Qatar rather than, as soon as they dump Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Bahrain, Russia, China, there's many, many countries that would take over that tournament instantly. Australia, France, Brazil, we don't need it. Sports don't need Qatar. So I think it's really a question that many people are feeding you that line. They're feeding our listeners saying, oh, it's impossible to fight corruption. What can we do? That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And as soon as you hear that, know that whoever's telling you that is either stupid or they're corrupt.
And okay, like that being said, like you have corruption probably where there is a financial crunch, and like you said, like in 2010 World Cup about Nigeria, and also I think Mikel, former Chelsea player, complained about it later on, where he had to spend money for his teammates to probably stay. So, but is match fixing and corruption prevalent in maybe something like Champions League, where you have the cream of football basically of the world?
Yeah, sadly, we've had match fixing in Champions League, and when I say that, this isn't some delusion or conspiracy theory. There have been court cases that have gone through the German court where we said these games in the Champions League have been fixed. A chapter that I think of my first book, The Fix: Soccer and Organized Crime, that will shock people, is called Sex and the Men in Black, and it talks about sexual bribery. So it's so common for referees in the Champions League to be offered women as, high-placed prostitutes as a sexual bribe the night or a couple of nights before the game. This isn't happening all the time. It doesn't happen with all the teams, but it happens so frequently that no one is surprised. So in the high-level Champions League, you're seeing the same kind of stuff going on, but without the Asian organized crime guys coming in. You're seeing fixing going on in the early rounds of Champions League, even some of the early stages, the group stages. You're seeing the final week of the group stage of Champions League. That's early December. So that's, the four teams have played each other. Those games are notorious for fixing, absolutely notorious. So I understand what you're saying about money being a protection against sporting corruption, but you'll have a team from, say, former Soviet empire like Dinamo Zagreb or one of those teams out of Serbia and Croatia in that area who are very good. They can get into the group stages, but they don't stand any chance once they're out of those group stages. So there's many, many stories around them of those guys losing important games by massive scores, like 6-7-1. I'm not saying that those games were necessarily fixed, but I'm saying the gambling market said, hang on, there's something really weird going on. And they always happen in that final week, that final group stage week.
So like, okay, I've been living under a rock because these are things which you don't imagine. You know, like when you see, okay, you don't imagine. Like you think football is the purest form of sport, basically, because you think, okay, in cricket it's possible, but I think generally generally people think you don't have, like betting in this. I want to ask you one more thing, like in relation to UEFA, and this has been like controversial, maybe a conspiracy theory, I don't know. When they take the draw, do you think the draws are rigged?
I've heard stories from insiders and rumors and allegations, but I haven't been able to confirm that. So, and what I'm saying is quite controversial. It's all fact. And so I don't want to lose credibility with yourself or our listeners by saying, oh yeah, like I don't have that confirmed. So I'd prefer not to answer that question.
No, the conspiracy theory that I heard is that they have the balls which they pick out, and it's probably warm and cold balls, so they know which one they're picking out. So they have...
Yeah, look, I can't confirm that story. I do know there's fixing going on in the World Cup final. I do know there's fixing at various stages of Champions League. The stuff about the draw, I just don't know. I don't want to comment.
I mean, the fixing is much bigger than the draw, I think. I mean, that's a bigger thing than the draw. Why would you care about the draw?
If you're fixing a game, you're basically turning sport into theater. And again, many people who are listening to this have just turned off cricket. They're like, why would we bother watching cricket with all this match fixing? We'll watch football instead, because at least we think that football is, a pure game, a pure sport. But they're ruining football as well. And I think it's really, really problematic. If you look at how bad China is, China's got over 1 billion people, and its football team sucks. Like, just sucks. They're a terrible team. I mean, they would struggle to beat India, Nepal, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. I mean, they're just terrible. And they're terrible because it's so corrupt. Corruption kills sport.
Like, this is, yeah, it's quite eye-opening for me, like whatever you have said till now, because I would not have thought, like the highest that I could think of maybe corruption in football was, like I said, like the conspiracy theory of the draws being rigged. I mean, that was the maximum I could have thought of. I wanted to ask you, like, since you have been aware of this a lot and you have been involved in the form of books or maybe around people, what are the finances involved? Like, what is the scale of the finances involved in fixing a match?
Look, it depends on what match you're talking about. So I still have a number of contacts in the match fixing world, and they were fixing major tennis tournaments and working with players to throw games or lose points or sets in minor tennis, low level tennis games, ATP, WTA games, but pretty low. And they'd be buying the players for €90, €200. When I watched the World Cup fix being put together in 2006, the criminals went to a really prominent guy in Malaysia and asked for $1 million in cash. That was what it was going to take. They weren't going to take a bank transfer or checks or anything that was that people could find out later. They wanted the cash in hand. The gambling market on that investment of, say, $1 million could make, oh gosh, 50, 60, 70, 80, $100 million. If you knew that one of those, if you knew Ghana was going to lose above the spread, 3 goals and more above Brazil, you would make massive amounts of money and nobody would be able to tell. Because Brazil's supposed to win anyway.
And generally this whole racket, like people, like what I've read, maybe true, maybe not very reliable sources, is generally happening around Southeast Asia. How true is that? Like, do they control the full market?
Look, the bookmakers are all based out of the Philippines. Their Southeastern Asian gambling market is by far the largest in the world. Maybe 60, 70% of the world is there. Most gambling markets go there. So what you have is fixers from those countries fly to Italy, Spain, France, Britain, Scotland, Ireland, Lithuania. I could go on naming it. There have been over 64 national police investigations into these cases. And then they link up with local criminals. And those local criminals fix the game, or they bribe the referee, or they pay off the club owner. And those Asian guys fix the gambling market. So it's like an international business deal, criminal business deal that goes on.
And like, I want to ask you, like, you have written so much about all this. Like, aren't you scared? Don't you get threats or something?
Yeah, while I was involved in the gang, yes, absolutely, it was very dangerous. Now there have been so many police investigations, so much work on it. So as just said, there's been over 64 national police investigations from Greece, from Turkey, from Cyprus, from Israel, from Lebanon. I mean, I could take too much of your time, but isn't listing off all the countries. In fact, I think 2 days ago, the Czech Football Association in the Czech Republic, right in the heart of Europe, the vice president of that football association had to resign because he was in some way implicated in a match fixing scandal going on there. So, almost every country that plays football, my own country of Canada, is notorious for this. So it exists all around the world. It really does. And it's really a massive, massive network of corruption.
So, like, do you think like some league as like financially secure as the Premier League would also have a version of it?
Look, we already know it's had. I mean, Bruce Grobbelaar was famously put on trial in the late 1990s for fixing games. In my opinion, he was never convicted because the juries in England were just so starstruck. They were like, oh my gosh, here's this amazing footballer, and they wouldn't convict him. But the evidence against him, and the evidence that eventually the House of Lords looked at and just said, this is a joke. Like, it's clear this guy was fixing games. So we've already got cases in the Premier League. I think what you're talking about is whether they pay the players so much that they're not likely to fix. And I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that is the number one defense of many of these leagues, is if you pay your players properly. So again, I want to keep my credibility. I don't want to say it's a major problem in the English Premier League. It's certainly a problem in Italy. It's certainly a problem in Spain. We have number of really prominent ex-Real Madrid, ex-Barcelona players fixing games, not for Real Madrid or Barcelona, but in the Spanish top league, La Liga. The English Premier League, I think, is protected, and I think it's more protected now because of the work of people like Arsene Wenger, who have internationalized the English Premier League. I don't think the English Premier League is particularly English anymore. I think it's more like an international league. The managers, the coaches, the owners, the players are from all over the world. But 20 years ago, when it was English, they had a significant problem of gambling, which still exists with many of their top English players. English players are susceptible to approaches because there's so many of them are addicted to gambling. Sterling, the former Liverpool player, was talking about how when he played for England, they had poker games going on, and some of the guys were in debt to 300,000 English pounds. That's how bad the gambling was. Wayne Rooney had an issue with gambling. And I'm not suggesting that Sterling or Wayne Rooney fix games, but I am saying when you have that level of gambling, somewhere, somehow, there's going to be some problems.
No, I knew like there are subtle problems. Like I think Sturridge was banned by FIFA for his involvement in maybe the betting part of his transfer of him going to another club. So he had given out the information to one of his close friends or family, and they bet on it, and probably they won, and probably he was. But I didn't know like about this, like this kind of. Is that bad? Like you also know about gambling, because many people like you said, like Rooney have come out and probably like exposed light on the topic, and probably rightly so, and it probably will help many other people and players going forward.
Sorry, brother, let's not be naive. Wayne Rooney came out and talked about it because he was in debt. And I want to emphasize for all our listeners what that means. You have a top player who's paid millions of pounds a year, not only by salary, but in marketing and merchandising. So he didn't come out and talk about his gambling debts because he wanted suddenly to become a clean guy and talk about this. He came out because he had no money. And when I mean no money, he had no money. You think about how much money a guy like Wayne Rooney makes, and you think that he's in debt for millions of pounds as well. You realize that he has taken an enormous salary plus 7 or 8 million pounds, however much it was, and squandered that. That's why guys like Wayne Rooney come up. That's why Gianni Buffon, the goalkeeper, the famous Italian goalkeeper, came out and talked about it, because he had a debt of 1 million euro. So that means he'd spent all his money, all the cash, all the houses, all the cars, all the stuff that he made. I mean, and this is an international icon, and 1 million euro. So he had zero plus down 1 million. So that's how bad the gambling among some, I don't want to say that all of these players, but some of these players gamble far, far too much. And it's a kind of an open, dirty secret that very few people around the English Premier League talk about. And that really is necessary. That's really necessary to grab it. May I tell you another story?
Yeah, please go ahead.
There's a player of my generation called Tony Adams. He was the captain of the Arsenal football team, and he was an alcoholic. He drank too much. He had a terrible criminal drunk driving where somebody died, and he ended up in prison. And he got out of prison, and he was at the same time the captain of England, the captain of Arsenal. He was right at the height of his fame. And he realized that with his addiction, he had no one to turn to. He had no one to go to, because every time he would try to go to a clinic, he'd walk into the clinic and people would, oh my gosh, and it would be released to the press and the media. So he set up an addiction clinic for English Premier League players, so that they could talk about drinking, they could talk about drugs, and they could specifically talk about gambling. And when I talked to the psychologist at Sporting Chance, this is the organization that he set up some 20 years ago, they say gambling and gaming is the new big addiction for our players. It is a massive, massive problem. So again, I want to keep my credibility. I'm not suggesting that there have been fixes in the English Premier League in the last 10 years, but I am saying that there is an unexplored issue. And if people want to know how bad it can get, just look at the case of Keith Gillespie, who committed suicide because of his gambling debts. This is a massive problem among those top players.
I just don't know what I really know about football after talking to you for so long, because it just feels like everything is rigged, and because you know.
No, look, there's a couple of things that we have a problem in international football, but we can clean it up. People care deeply about the sport. Football is a fantastic sport. It gives many people, including myself, tremendous friendships, tremendous moments, great memories, and really connections with other people. Here I am speaking to millions of Nepalis about our common love. So we can clean up football. We can make it better. It's not that everything in football is corrupt. It's that a few people have been allowed to get into the game that we love and are corrupting it. It's quite easy to get rid of those guys. And if we could go on and just enjoy our football.
And of course, that's the match fixing. There's also another not unexplored, another controversial topic of third party ownership and that whole different ball game. I think it was I think Football Leaks was the book which I read about it. And do you think there's a fixing market for also transfers, and maybe owners play a part in it?
Yes.
In what way? If you could shed some.
Well, look, I mean, I don't think it matters. I mean, what I'm talking about matters to people. What I'm talking about when you fix a match, that actually matters to our listeners, and it matters to me, and it matters to you, because it's the results of the game. It's what we're actually watching. That thing about third-party ownership and whether the manager, the owner are taking cuts, who cares? The only people they're ripping off is themselves, and those rich guys. They're trying to get commissions. They're not trying to get commissions. Does it happen? Absolutely it happens, and it happens in some shocking cases. But really, it doesn't affect the sport. It doesn't affect the the product, the passion that you and I and our listeners have. So third party agency, yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, somebody's having their money stolen, but it doesn't corrupt the actual sport itself.
And also in the past, I think Platini had come out and said how he was involved and he probably knew about some form of, manipulation in regards to FIFA and World Cup and bids, everything. When everything is so clear and people are being accused and probably with facts, with, evidence to prove what they're speaking, how can something like Qatar be, kept under the carpet?
Well, I don't think it is being kept under the carpet. I think everyone knows about it. But I think much of the sports integrity industry, particularly the academics, some of the journalists, have accepted money from agencies set up by Qatar to change the direction of the debate. So they'll never talk about human trafficking. They'll never talk about the modern day slave system. Again, the words of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch that Qatar has set up in the construction of that sports infrastructure. I think that's a problem. I think that's a much bigger problem than the stuff about third-party agencies. The problem about modern day slavery to construct a stadium and people are coming back in coffins, that's a real problem. The fact that $1.7 trillion of cash is flowing and it's corrupted more than football in more than 64 different countries is a problem. Third-party ownership, okay. A few owners pay more than they should. Hey, I can live with that.
So do you think
I'm not saying it's right, but it's like.
Do you think football, the corruption in football in the sport generally is much more than just the game?
Look, FIFA has a problem. The Department of Justice brought down indictments and convictions of almost all of their senior top management. But the essential system that created that endemic corruption in world football continues. That has also affected match fixing. So it's really difficult to get effective action against match fixing. And gradually, match fixing will kill off football. Unless it's cleaned up, people, be it in Kathmandu, be it in Delhi, be it in London, be it in Toronto, will just be like, you know what, I don't want to watch that sport anymore. It's not, it's too much like theater. I did an interview with a Serie A player, the top league in Italy. And he said, yeah, I fix games and I hate it. You know why? Because I'm a football player. I'm not an actor. And as soon as you start participating in fixing, you become an actor. You don't become an athlete. You're just pretending. And I think that will be the end of football unless people...
Of course, and
brother, on that depressing note, I've got to go.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll just ask you one final question before we
Please.
leave. Okay, so being you're a good author, and if you had to choose one standout moment from your career, what would that be? Like writing career.
I think for anyone who's writing a book, for anyone who's out there, get up in the morning, have your cup of tea, bring your cup of tea with you, sit at the desk and just write, and set your phone for a certain amount of time, be it 50 minutes, and don't check your emails, don't check your, just focus and work, drinking your cup of tea, and don't doubt yourself. You can do it. I'd say the same thing. I've talked with many top professional footballer players, and it's you cannot doubt. You've just got to do. So if I had advice for people who want to write books, that would be what I'd say. Is just do it. Don't talk about it. Just get up in the morning, get up before your family does, make your tea, and then get cracking on that thing.
And if you had to choose one moment from your career as a writer, which one would that be?
It is that ephemeral moment when you're sitting and the words are flowing. I know what you want me to say. You want me to say, oh, someday when I won this award, or, I had this great dinner with somebody, and those don't count. That's like the icing on the cake. What really matters is when something works. And again, I think that in any of the athletes who are listening, will know what this means, because it's when you're doing the sport, it's fantastic. It's just working. You don't care whether you want a medal or an award or something like that. Those are secondary. What is the joy of the doing? And that's what I'm trying to say. Probably not particularly well, but it's the joy when things are working well and it's just moving along.
Definitely. And on that note, Declan, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. And hope we can talk again soon. Thank you once again for coming. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
I'm fair, Malinga.
Player-wise, it would have to be Steven Gerrard, just because, again, before he became a journalist, he was someone I just admired massively in terms of the absolute complete footballer. I think if you were trying to make a footballer in a factory, it would be Steven Gerrard, someone who, I think JB Carragher summed it up best once when he said, Steven Gerrard's biggest strength is he doesn't have any weaknesses.
The stadium. I don't see really need to do that. Mainly such a big spending, but it's true that it would be a fantastic stadium. That's not bad, but you have to be careful, and mainly at this moment when we are going to face a very difficult time.